Hey guys, so today we are going to talk about chapter 8, all about inheritance. I think inheritance is super fun. It's really neat to do Punnett squares and figure out why things are the way they are. I think it's cool. So I hope you enjoy this chapter as much as I enjoy this chapter. Let's start off with the father of genetics is Johann Gregor Mendel, and he is the father of genetics. And so here he is. He was a monk, and oftentimes going into religion was one of the main ways to be able to educate yourself was to go into the faith. So Mendel was a monk, and he was in Czech Republic, and he studied science. And one of his things that he was really interested in was genetics, which of course we didn't call it genetics then. We didn't even know about that kind of stuff then. But there was predominant theories. So when we talk about genetics, the theory of the day back in Gregor Mendel's time was continuous variation. With continuous variation, it was believed that you are the product of your parents, obviously, but you are some sort of genetic combination in the middle. So here's mom and here's dad, and you're this, you're in the middle somewhere, and you're not dad, and you don't have traits of mom, and you don't have traits of dad. You have somewhere in the middle of those traits. You are a continuous variation. You are the middle road between mom and dad's genetic traits. That was the theory of the day. um, and Mendel came along and he came up with his own data, and his theory was discontinuous variation, that you are going to see that the offspring are going to have the traits of mom or dad. Sometimes um, mom's traits on some things and dad's traits on other things, but it is discontinuous variation. It's not the middle of the road. It is this trait or this trait, and that's the way it is. That's what Mendel came up with his theory of discontinuous variation. So really that's what we go off of now. And of course, every time we say that this is the way, it's not always. There's always exceptions to the rule. We can never ever say that things are totally black and white. So we'll go into those exceptions later. But in general, this is the theory of discontinuous variation. And when Mendel came up with this, it was pretty much just like whatever. Nobody really paid any attention to it, and we didn't think about it until well after he was gone. And then it was like, oh man, look at these notes. These are some pretty cool theories here. So what did he do? He used a model system, and that model system was the pea plant. And with the pea plant, it had some pretty cool traits. So with the pea plant, it was really easy. This was a great model system because of these traits. You either had peas that were yellow or green. They were round or they were wrinkled. They were very easy to distinguish these traits, right? The flowers were purple or white. The pea pods themselves were inflated or constricted, where they look like they were vacuum sealed. The pod could be yellow or green. All of these very easily distinguishable traits. This model system was really great. These traits are um, expressed by a certain gene that covers these very simple traits that are very easy to distinguish. Another cool thing about these guys is that he could use a reciprocal cross to get his results. And being that what he would do is, we'll talk way more about flowers in 1012. When we get into those, and you'll need to know the parts of them, but there's basically girl parts and boy parts to the flowers. The girl parts are going to contain the egg that gets fertilized by the sperm, and the sperm is located in the pollen grains. So you're going to have male parts that are going to produce pollen, and then you're going to have the female parts with the stigma and the style and all that good stuff that's going to catch the pollen, and then the little sperm's going to go down and fertilize the egg in that female part. So you have male and female flower parts with peas. And so what he would do is he would make sure that he would cut off all the male parts on this plant, or cut off the female parts on that other plant, to make sure that this is the pollen that I'm going to use from this plant, and I'm going to take this pollen and I'm going to fertilize this plant over here. And I know that I'm fertilizing this plant with this pollen because I've removed all the other pollen from that plant. Only female parts are left. So he can manipulate the plants to make sure that what he's breeding is breeding true. He knows what the mom plant is. He knows what the dad plant is. And when he performed these experiments, it didn't matter if mom was purple flowers or mom was white flowers. He always got the same result, no matter who mom or dad was, and that is called a reciprocal cross. So in these crosses, when he's creating these experiments, we are going to have the first generation, and those are parents. And P for parent. So the P generation is the parent generation. And in this case, parents are going to have one parent is going to have violet flower. Didn't matter if it's mom or dad. Again, reciprocal crosses. It doesn't matter who's passing on these genes. One of them, I will just say mom, has violet flowers, and dad will have the white flowers. But again, it doesn't matter. One will have white, one will have purple. And when those parents were crossed, the offspring that they produced are going to be called the F1 generation. So the first generation or F1 generation is that first set of offspring. And in this case, when we crossed a purple plant with a white plant, we ended up with all purple offspring. Every offspring was purple. They were all hybrids. And when we took that first generation of F1s and we took this F1 and we bred it with this F1, and we're going to have a second generation. And now that second generation is called the F2. So these are basically like the grandkids of the P generation, of the parent generation. So we're down to the grandkids. And now here we have that in this generation, the F2 generation, we have about 705 violet flowers and we have about 200 white flowers. So in general, it's about a 3-to-1 ratio of purple to white, which is weird because in the first generation, the F1 generation, everything was purple. So why did the white show up? That was the question. Why did the white show up if all of the offspring look purple? How did we get white? How did white skip a generation? And now we know this because we know about things like dominant and recessive. So we know that traits are dominant if they mask the other traits, and they are recessive if they show up only when you have two recessive traits. So we're going to get into that stuff in the next video. But what I want you to know in this video, again, Gregor Mendel he's the father of genetics, and he bucked the system that at the time said it was continuous variation, and his data suggested a different type of variation called discontinuous, where you're not a blend in continuous, you're not somewhere in the middle of mom and dad. If we were doing continuous variation with those pea plants and we had purple and white, we would say that the F1 generation would be pink if it was continuous variation, but that's not what happened, right? The F1 generation was purple. So this is discontinuous variation where the offspring from the parents are going to have traits of either mom or dad expressed. It's not middle of the road. It's not pink. It is purple or it is white. This is discontinuous variation. His model system was the pea plant, and it was super cool because it had, again, all these really cool characteristics that were very easily noticeable, that you could see yellow or green, wrinkled or smooth, all of this purple or white flowers, all these very simple traits covered in the genes of these plants. Here is that ratio that I was telling you about when we looked at flower color, and it was basically 3-to-1, 3.15 technically, 2-1. Flower position, is it on the end of the flower, or is it near the stem? Is it axial or terminal? Again, 3-to-1. Plant height, were the plants really tall or were they shorter in the dwarf size? 3-and-1. Seed texture, round or wrinkled, yellow or green. Inflated seed pods are constricted, and green pod color over yellow pod color. And basically all this stuff was a 3-to-1 ratio, giving us the knowledge that one of these traits is dominant and the other is going to be recessive. So if something is dominant, it's bossy, right? It's the person that is dominating the conversation. That's what you notice, and they will mask the traits of recessive. So if something's recessive, it's latent. It only shows up if you have two versions of it. If you have both sets of chromosomes of a recessive trait. Recessives are masked by dominant traits if they're buddied up together like that. So you're only going to see the dominant trait. Let's go into the laws of inheritance in the next video.